let's talk through day 2 of SEC Media Days. It's going to be the first of a couple of segments, maybe 3, maybe 4 of the day following SEC Media Days, day 2, because it was loaded. We had Georgia, we got Tennessee, Missouri, Oklahoma, and I kind of want to get started in the order that we got to see the coaches, mostly because Georgia was dealing with news that Kirby Smart had to talk about. You'll remember that I made a segment last week following the news that a 22nd Georgia football player had been charged with a driving-related offense since January 15, 2023, when Devin Willock and Chandler LaCroix died in a fatal crash while racing. I thought that perhaps that was going to be a bigger story going into the SEC Media Days because it is a media event, and Georgia, by many measures, is the standard in the SEC, even as they weren't able to win the SEC championship last year. And yeah, Kirby Smart chose to address it at the Days on Tuesday in Dallas. The quote was, "Our Classic City collective for over a year has been substantially fining guys for those things. That's not something that's new. That's something that's been ongoing outside of my jurisdiction that they decided to implement and have done to a considerable amount." Mostly what he's saying is there's only so much I can do about this. He also did not necessarily allude to there wouldn't be any internal suspensions or punishment that be handed out. But this is kind of like what Mike Gundy did with Ollie Gordon in talking about it, at least. It's, hey, I'm not going to have that dude missing games because the justice system is going to do what the justice system does, and there's going to be plenty that he's going to have to answer for in due course, in addition to whatever he might have to do in-house. He just didn't want to talk about what those punishments might be. You can speculate on what those things should be. You can also speculate on what you think a head coach should do in this situation. But as far as I'm concerned, I don't want these coaches to treat these players like children. I call them kiddos because I get to know them when they are 12, 13, 14 years old, and all of them are kiddos to me. Like I often say that parents go through recruiting once. I go through recruiting 300 times a year. I want them all to do well. I want them all to be smart. I want them all to have everything that they have earned and deserve. That said, I get really upset when we start talking about treating 18, 19, 20 to 24-year-olds like children, because they are not. Once they've turned 18, they are adults in this country. 21, they get to make their own decisions for the most part. Are they in the best position to make those decisions? Maybe, maybe not, but it's not up to you. You don't get to tell somebody what they're going to do with their life, and you certainly have to let them answer for the consequences. Like, there are a lot of folks that are up in arms about name, image, and likeness and the money that the players are making. I'm going, you sound jealous. You sound like you don't want them to have it because you didn't have it. You sound like you want to take away their rights to do what they would like to do with their lives because it didn't go that well for you. Look, in the United States, we can give a person a rifle and send them into combat. If we can do that, get out of their way about all this other stuff, man. And if they're going to make stupid decisions, like breaking the law, then they will need to answer for those stupid decisions, like breaking the law. I think that's the long and the short of it. Now, Kirby also, one of the takeaways I got from him, is in on the name, image, and likeness. Like the money that is being transferred from one group to another, we could talk about that. But he also made a point of saying, look, we want players that want to be at Georgia, and I don't take it hard anymore that players want to transfer because of playing time or want to transfer because they might be getting paid a little bit more than we're willing to pay them. But he also made clear that there's a hierarchy in place that is old school. Like he said, you don't come in and make more money than the starters. You earn what you get. The longer you stay, the more opportunities you get. And you're like, wow, it sounds like Kirby Smart has the keys to the checkbooks, because he kind of does. Like I'm doing a lot of research on name, image, and likeness and collectives, and what I'm mostly coming to find out is that the folks that run these collectives go to coaches and say, we have this much in the budget. How do you want to divvy it up? And then they divvy it up as they see fit, depending on who's there, who's returning, and how important that person is to winning, to say nothing of how important it is to get them all graduated. One of the unforeseen outcomes, and really a great outcome, is we're talking about being up in arms about academics, and Nick Saban's going on about, oh my God, we worked so hard to make sure that people were going to graduate. Now they're going up in smoke. No, it's not. There's this thing called the Alston Award, where universities can pay their student athletes for good grades. As a matter of fact, I've seen this work, okay? The University of Tulsa didn't make a bowl game, or wouldn't have made a bowl game, a couple of years ago because the APR score was on the floor. And this is at a place that likes to bill itself as the Harvard of the Midwest. I hate that, by the way. There's only one Harvard, and we don't need to be co-opted. The University of Tulsa is just fine. Pretty damn good academic institution. Also, this year, the football team had its highest ever GPA. What happened? They started paying kids to have good grades. people will respond to financial incentives. That's part and parcel to capitalism. I think Kirby Smart knows this as well. In the football way, I think Georgia's in a really unique place because in the SEC, they know that they're going to get everybody's best every week, but he's really picked up this mantra that he lives by, which is, hey, better is just a week away. Everybody in the SEC can beat you. And I would amend that to everybody but Vanderbilt in the SEC can beat you. Vanderbilt's getting under my skin, guys. I need them to be good. I need them to be decent. I need them to show a pulse. You can't just win 2 games in 2 seasons and play in the best conference in football. It's a privilege right now, man. I just don't see Vanderbilt holding up their end, especially as the Commodores. They don't need no more money. They got all the money. If they want a good football team, go get one, right? I also think that Smart is benefiting from, well, Coach Saban ain't across from him on the sideline anymore, but he does not expect Alabama to take a dip. If for no other reason than Coach Saban got to help handpick his successor in Kalen DeBoer, and you've seen what Kalen DeBoer has been able to do in the transfer portal and in recruiting. They haven't really missed that much. Of course, we're all going to miss Nick Saban, who's the greatest college football coach of all time, but given the circumstances of when he retired and what Kalen DeBoer was had to work with, phenomenal job, and Kirby Smart is choosing to be reverent of that. They gave 65% of their total production back from 2023. Big part of that is Carson Beck, right? Carson Beck threw for nearly 4,000 yards, was outstanding. I also think that this is going to be a year in which we get to find out whether or not Carson Beck is good, because they're able to keep him upright last year, just giving up 13 sacks, and 4 of those 5 starters are back, so that offensive line is going to be good. But you know who's not? Brock Bowers, right? Let's not act like that's not a big deal. Let's not act like the safety blanket was the guy that basically beat Auburn by himself. Is Carson Beck that good? I don't think he's that good, but we got to talk about him being that good because he's starting quarterback on what is going to be one of the 3 best teams in college football, we think, this year, alongside some really heavy hitters and a lot of other quarterbacks that are going to be good. But this is also an SEC that is deep at the quarterback position. You go from Carson Beck to Jackson Dart to Quinn Ewers to Jackson Arnold. Like, you can keep going down. Garrett Nussmeier, Nico Iamaleava. Like, I can keep going. Like, it's a really deep league on that. But I guess the question that I really have for him is, okay, what are they going to do with Trevor Etienne? Because it sounds like they're going to use Trevor Etienne the way that they used James Cook. But there's only one James Cook, and I don't know that Trevor Etienne has that kind of juice to be a guy that can catch the ball out of the backfield and run between the tackles 7.5 yards deep. But he could be, right? And if you got a great run game at Georgia, you know that the defense is going to keep up their end. It's who Carson Beck is going to be mostly throwing passes to. And it looks like it's going to be Dillon Bell, but is Dillon Bell Brock Bowers? Is a guy that didn't catch 40 balls all last year going to turn into George Pickens? We're going to get to find that out and see. 14 of those starters returned from last year's squad. Again, they're in a great spot. At safety, they're a little light, but they are talented. They get Malachi Starks back, who was a Thorpe Award finalist, their best defensive back. And KJ Bolden, according to Kirby Smart, is going to help them. He has an opportunity to play right away, mostly because they need him to, but also he said that KJ Bolden is farther ahead right now than where Malachi Starks was at the same point in his career. And if that's any sign, they're going to be really outstanding at the safety position. And we know that Kirby is an old defensive back, so those guys are going to be ready and raring to go. Alongside guys like Ellis Robinson IV, who I think could be one of the really fun defensive stories to break out in the SEC this season. If there's a weakness on the Georgia football team, it is defensive tackle. Okay? Let me make sure I get this all right, because I'm not talking about Mykel Williams. I'm not talking about edge. I'm talking about in the middle, the Jordan Davis, the Jalen Carter position. In years past, they have been excellent. I thought at one point Jalen Carter should have been up. Jordan Davis should have been up for the Heisman Trophy because they were that good at the nose in that 3-4. But in 2024, you're talking about Nazir Stackhouse is your best interior defensive lineman. He started every game last year, but he notched just 2 sacks in 2023. All SEC second team. Next best on the list, though, is Warren Brinson, who posted just 2 sacks in 13 games last year, and they came against UAB and Vanderbilt. You're going to need those guys to step up in a big way, right? You're going to need those guys to take the leap if you expect to play for a national championship, let alone an SEC championship. Last thing I took away from the SEC Media Days was just the chemistry between Kirby Smart and Nick Saban on the SEC Now set. Those guys are a buddy cop show. Like, it was great. I really enjoyed hearing them go back and forth, because it's not a whole lot of opportunities you get to see 2 guys that have accomplished quite a bit in this sport who not only share a chemistry and camaraderie, but they have a tremendous amount of respect for each other, so much that they could tell jokes about each other. Kirby Smart got up on stage and started with, hey, there's Coach Saban who helped raise me. Also, I got in without a media credential. And then he told that story on set. Turned out that he found out what the story was about the guy that stopped Nick Saban being a 4-star recruit. And he's like, man, I don't know. And his SID was next to him when they met that guy at the credential gate. And he showed Kirby Smart's credential, but Kirby wasn't wearing it, so they let him in. So that's how Kirby Smart was able to get in without a credential. And Coach Saban has been taking it really well. I think he is on it when he says, look, he's the best assistant that I ever had. And he's had some good ones. He also ranked them. He had Kirby at 1. He had Steve Sarkisian at 2. He had Lane at 3. And I'm sure that Lane's going to catch feelings about that. But we also get to learn what Coach Saban's life has been like since he left coaching. He's texting people now, apparently. And Kirby told a story about how he and Lane Kiffin have a side conversation. Every time that one of them gets a text from Coach Saban, they talk about it because it's that big a deal. He says it's like getting the first text message in your life because Coach Saban has got his own email. He's got his own text messaging. He's doing he's taking out the trash. This is a new world for Coach Saban, and I'm here for it, having a lot of fun with it. I'm going to be back with more later today, talking about Tennessee, talk about Oklahoma, maybe even talk about Missouri. If you like the channel, please be sure to subscribe. We're marching toward 100,000 subscribers here on the #1 college football show.